going into another episode of the DRH show. Of course, in each episode, I'll be talking to interesting people within the fields of psychology, mental health, and well-being. Our brilliant guest for today is a life coach and a psychotherapist, Sleet and Siobhain Crosbie. Thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, we'd just like to get an idea about your background. Could you please tell us who you are, where you're from? Give us an abridged version of your life, pretty much like how you became a life coach and a psychotherapist. I think we'll start with Siobhain first because she seems ready.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Well, firstly, my life was a history of trauma. I had a child, and that child led me to need to retrain and be qualified in something to provide for him. So it started me on a training course in relations counselling. That counselling opened my mind to absolutely everything that I didn't understand before. On the basis of that, I did 5 years studying squeezed into 4. That led me to a private practice 5 years later, and that led to APS, which I'm very proud to say I've been fully booked on for most of my entire vocation, which is now, I've been qualified since 2003.
Correct. And of course, when you say APS, it's Ayanay Psychological.
No, my own private practice is called APS Psychotherapy and Counselling. So I practice psychotherapy. I work in a very, very deep way, helping people understand the familiarity of where they bring themselves back to that they didn't understand. So if you like, bringing their unconscious to their conscious awareness, helping them process that and move through the trauma that has actually held them stuck in their adult life, recreating stuff from their childhood, if you like. On the back of that, 2018, I got diagnosed with colon cancer. I couldn't work for that year. Myself and David Sleet had met via LinkedIn in, I think it was October 2017, and I was diagnosed in January. We'd been talking about recreating something and combining David's coaching skills and my therapy skills, and we created APA, and APA is Ayanay Accreditation. Membership, which effectively is about helping therapists. So I kind of shifted my focus up a level in relation to my own self and my professional life, but I also wanted to not just work with clients, which is what I still continue to do, but I actually wanted to expand the availability to other therapists to be able to help them, help my peers, which is going remarkably well. So it's the smallest snapshot of my journey, but I can honestly say I think the success that I've had has been based on the trauma that I've been through, but also rectifying that trauma, working through that trauma, having therapy myself, and understanding what it was that created all my original dynamics as a child. So for me, self-awareness changed my life, and if I could educate the entire world as to how to recognise the power of it, changed my life emotionally, which led to where I am now, but it also saved my life with the cancer. If I hadn't been so self-aware, I wouldn't have got checked out. I wouldn't have got that colonoscopy done. And truth be told, being diagnosed at stage 1 was an horrendous process to go through, but actually for most other people's perception, they saw me as sailing through it. I didn't sail through it, but my mind did. My body didn't, but my mind did. And that was based on my ability to utilise all my knowledge of acceptance. When you're in a position where you are hit with cancer, your whole life
being resilient.
And your whole life is taken over by the control of what you have to do. You're in hospital every week, if not every other day. It's you're totally not in where you want to be. That's the best way of putting it. But accepting that, and accepting even the conflict of feeling amazing when I went down for my surgery, which I did. I felt like I do today. But knowing that I had something growing inside of me that could kill me and would kill me is a huge conflict in your mind and your body. It's like knowing something that doesn't feel real, but actually accepting that it didn't feel real, but going with it anyway is the best example I can give. And I can smile because every example that I had in hospital, which was horrendous when I actually speak it out loud, was from a place of smiling in my mind, going, don't worry, it'll be fine, they'll take care of it, they know what they've got to do. and then being, oh God, I'm so grateful for my self-awareness. So, you know, what might have been happening was physically at times horrendous, but my capacity to smile knowing that I had that self-awareness and that ability to let others take care of me in that moment, it was so, it hit me more so during my 10 days in hospital than it had done at any other time since even learning how to be self-aware, because it was the hardest situation I'd been in physically. So to utilise it in those moments where, unless you've gone through colon cancer and understand the surgery that goes with losing half your colon, and unfortunately for me I had quite a lot of repercussions after that initial surgery, when I think about the power of just saying, it's okay, let it go, you can't do anything about it, just run with it, thank God I've got this in my mind that can help me cope. That was literally my mantra almost every day, thank God for my self-awareness. So I advocate therapy to every human being on the planet. It's not about just having an issue, it's about understanding ourselves, and when we understand ourselves we can work in relationships in a really positive, productive way. And we've extended that ethos into our business, which is APA. Everything that we do with APA is based on a foundation of therapeutic principles. You know, working with people, we collaborate with our clients. You know, we can't fix people, we help facilitate them. But it's a collaboration of a relationship. And we do that with APA in the way that we work. We collaborate with people. So we've got extortionate amount of projects going on, which David will explain.
Let's get there.
I'm just the CEO, I just delegate everything. But basically that's his forte, to explain that. And I will leave that with him. But honestly, for me as a human being, when we learn self-awareness, the power of it is there's a magic to it. And that magic, it's impossible to find a word in the English dictionary for me personally, because that's the only language I speak, that actually represents the power of it. It's too big almost. And I personally believe that we haven't actually accessed all of what we know as human beings about our own mind and the way it works. And because I find it fascinating how synchronicity can suddenly appear. You know, I can be doing this with you today and you can guarantee weirdly in an hour I'll see something with the name Dennis on it. And I just find that synchronicity of almost weird coincidences, it blows my mind. But it reminds me every single time about the power of what we have as human beings. And trauma for me, when you go through a trauma, it's a phase of your life. If you get the right help and you're fortunate enough to have the right people around you, or you search those people out to help you, your entire life can be changed. You take control of your trauma rather than your trauma controlling you. And for me personally, that's life is an essence. We have that life right now, we're breathing. It's up to us to utilise it in the best way possible.
Brilliant. I think the main takeaway of when I asked you about your background is that it's all about self-awareness and it's all about taking control.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll explore more of that later, but let's go to Dave. Give us pretty much the same, help us situate about your background and how it shaped your approaches with what you're doing as a life coach.
Okay, so I was raised in a home that for 10 years, from the age of 4.5, we had 96 children being fostered in that home, and that gave me an exposure to almost every kind of evil that is done to children. So for my formative years, I was being given a huge learning curve around trauma, the impacts of trauma on children, but also how the systems responded to that. That became pretty much one of my biggest building blocks, and is still a large facet of what makes me who I am now. I went on to desire a career within the military, which I was not able to fulfill. I received a head injury before my final medical, which meant I was medically discharged from any possibility of military service. But that changed my world in an instant. And I got into the hospitality industry. And like most people, I fell into it. I didn't, it wasn't something that I'd ever planned for, it wasn't something I ever looked for. And very quickly I got involved in the training side of the industry. After learning the craft, I developed the first 90-day induction program across the UK. We didn't know it at the time, we were just creating a new training program. But it became the model. And that led me to a particular HR and training manager from the US who pointed out I wasn't training people in the industry, I was coaching them. And back in the early 2000s, I didn't really know what the difference was. I was just doing what needed to be done. I went to the States and I saw coaching firsthand, and within the year I had qualified as a life coach. And since then, everything has been about looking at the systems and how you can have a systemic approach to support somebody achieve the outcomes that they desire. The journey to where we are now, for me, ultimately started with the production of the Psychological Hive, which is the guide I wrote, which emphasises the elements that exist in the most successful companies and the most successful people in the world. And understanding those elements allow us to replicate them for ourselves, so we can achieve a different outlook, a different outcome. And when Vonnie and I met on LinkedIn, the conversations really kind of started from how can we get this idea of success into the therapeutic and coaching arena. And APA kind of formed as really the fusion of these two sets of ideas, that the therapeutic sector and the coaching sector, which traditionally have been kept so far apart, don't need to be.
But I do think it's important to say this. When I first met David, and I apologise for coming in, but David's and this is no disrespect to other coaches out there, but David was a coach that really understood the depths of trauma to the degree that I understood it through my practice. So that his ability was so important for me to be able to want to connect with him on that kind of level and want to create something, because without that ability to understand, which is where his history has played a huge part in him understanding trauma, the repercussions of trauma, and he lived it alongside the other children that were fostered in his home. So to have somebody that was a coach know that and understand the way that I worked, although we speak very different languages, we often mean exactly the same thing. And it's a very powerful thing to meet somebody that intrinsically gets the depth of our unconscious in that way. So sorry for interrupting, but I really thought it was important to endorse David's coaching ability in that way, because it's not surface level, it's deep.
Yeah, but based from what I can understand is that it's actually the lived experience and the trauma that you've undergone is actually the ones that shape your approaches. But if you could just explore more about the kind of approaches that you use, and just on my last episode I was talking to a counsellor who was predominantly delivering her session through online, and I was wondering if you also deliver your sessions online, or obviously we're at Siobhain's clinic right now, but do you do sessions online, and what kind of approaches do you have?
Well, the theories that are not theories for me anymore, they're what I learnt, but they're ultimately who I am as an individual. My baseline is called person-centered therapy. It's based on 3 core conditions, which are empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. My personal belief is if you're not able to be that way with somebody as a therapist, there's more work needed to be done within yourself, because our role is to accept that individual in front of us and not judge them, and be open with them and be honest with them. And I think that's the baseline for every good relationship, whether or not it's in the therapy room or outside the therapy room. So person-centered, my car Carl Rogers is my literal baseline. I do that with everybody and everything. I also use psychodynamics, which is where the psychotherapy comes into play. And psychodynamics is very much about understanding the reenactment of our unconscious in our adult life in relation to our childhood. So bringing that person's unconscious up to the surface and helping them process that is very powerful. But the person-centered approach creates the strength of the relationship to take it there. And I think it's important to recognise that very often clients come in here and they're either, it's rare that they're excited, the odd one will be, but it is rare. Most of them come in feeling quite anxious because they're about to expose their innermost core feelings to you. And some have held on to things, secrets even, things that they feel shame and guilt about in their history, and I'm the first person to ever hear that, which is an incredibly humbling and privileged position to be in. But without that person-centered approach being that baseline, I can't create that trust with that person without that. And to be honest with you, that's why I say it applies to all relationships. Accepting somebody for who they are without judging them is a baseline for positivity. It's a baseline to create that trust. And that in itself leads me to using other techniques, other theories, like I've created my own model, the VC model, which is related to CBT, and it's about the person being able to label their feelings with an awareness. We are taught in society to go from something to a thought, yet actually often the feeling has provoked the thought and the thought provokes the feeling. And we react to those feelings and we react to those thoughts. So as a human being, it's almost like event, feeling, thought, reaction, consequence. And we react naturally in that way. The trick is to learn to actually stop when we're feeling something really negative, i.e. like rage or anger, and be able to step back and say, why am I feeling that? What am I going to do with that? Rather than instantaneous reaction with a thought process, which is ultimately, most people do react to their thought processes. So if you just think about rage, I want to kill that person, well, often they'll react to that thought process and they will follow through with that thought process, and the consequences are somebody's dead. So actually helping somebody learn to step back, but also with the other approaches, learn to understand where that rage is actually coming from, help that person understand and process what's going on. So it's almost like I use a combination of theories, which for me, I don't work in a theoretical way now. It's so natural for me to be able to do this after 18 years. So I don't sit down in front of a client and think, right, well, I'm going to use the PC approach or I'm going to use the psychodynamic approach. It is naturally what I do now. It's become who I am. So I also use Gestalt Therapy, and Gestalt Therapy is based on my relationship that has to be strong with that individual in front of me, because Gestalt Therapy is very direct, so it's really challenging. But when you work with somebody in a way where the trust is so strong, you have the capacity, because they've learned to understand who you are, you're not going to collude with avoidance, you're not there for that, you're there to help them. So I can get quite direct with people, so I can say to somebody, we've talked about this 4 times now, I'm confused. There's something that's actually keeping us stuck in this cycle. So help me understand what it is, because we need to move out of this for you to move forward. But I need to understand with you what is creating that stuck. So help me understand what it is. So I can go in and I can be very challenging, but without that baseline of person-centered, followed by the psychotherapeutic process, then that's the way I work. And to be honest with you, I'm always fully booked, so I must do something right.
It is that building up layer after layer of, and each layer that trust gets stronger and the bond gets stronger and the work becomes a lot more conducive to the desired outcome.
Yeah, and that's your own personal approach, differ from Siobhain's approach.
Yeah,
is it more complementary, I suppose?
No, it's very similar, and this is where I think the disciplines of coaching and therapy have almost been kept apart unnecessarily, because for me as a coach, we're looking at today and tomorrow. We're not looking at yesterday and today, and the excitement that somebody feels when coming to a coach is slightly different to the emotion that they have when they're seeing a counsellor or a therapist. So the process is slightly different, but the basis at which, as a coach, I work is person-centered. It is always about that person for whatever they have at that moment in time. It's about how do we move to tomorrow and the kind of tomorrow that they want to get to. As far as working online, offline, over the phone, I've worked predominantly face to face, but I have also worked internationally online. So it's about finding what works for a particular client, and again that comes down to person-centered. Build that relationship, work out which is the best way forward, and take it from their lead rather than this is the way I work, so you now have to conform to my model. For me, as soon as you start saying I work one way, you reduce the baseline from which you can grow.
Exactly. I think that what we have to understand is that whether you're a life coach, a psychotherapist, or a psychologist, it's really fundamental that you know how to be flexible and to adapt in order for you to meet your clients' needs. Now, I just want to, because earlier you mentioned about your work about Hive. If you could just educate us a bit more about what exactly is Hive and how does it influence what sort of work you're doing. Sorry.
Okay, so both Funny and I have our own independent companies. For myself, Hive Group UK is ultimately a core training program or core training system. We have 4 divisions. One for children connected to social care, one for justice sector, the ex-military, and one for selection and induction, which supports businesses. How does that complement APA? Ultimately, if you think of the support systems that have traditionally been available across the UK to those in need of support, think of those groups on one side of a riverbank and the support system as a bridge. And on the other side are all of the businesses and all of the futures and all of the positive outcomes that people want to reach. When we look at the way all of those things work traditionally, the bridge is too short. The people on one side of the bridge have to jump onto the bridge. When they are at their most vulnerable, at their most depleted, emotionally, physically, psychologically. But they also know that once they're on that bridge, however good the systems on that bridge are, they have to jump from the bridge into the future. And what Hive Group does, what APA does, is extends that bridge. So you don't have to jump so far onto the bridge. Because with the support of the professionals through APA, with the support of Hive Group directly to the people in need, they can move on to those programs, they can take that support, they can develop those skill sets. For the businesses and the outcomes, traditionally they look at that bridge and they see the people coming off of it and they go, whoa, I don't know how to work with that group or those people with those experiences. So what we do is we support those people and those businesses there so that they can actually incorporate them. And when you think in the UK, just looking at social care as an example, there are currently over 100,000 children looked after by the state. That's 100,000 people plus that at some point are going to need to get into work. And all those businesses who count that out because of the fear of what those people have been through. So by supporting those businesses and those young people, they can come together. That's 100,000 more people in the talent pool than is currently there.
Thank you. Now, aside from this, for everyone who's following Dave and Siobhain on social media, you might have recognized that they're quite passionate about accreditation for psychotherapists or counsellors. And I just want to understand the underlying reason behind this passion, and so far, what have you achieved with your advocacy of promoting accreditation?
Well, it really arose from I'm backtracking. A lady said to me online years ago, and it was a flippant comment. I wish I could remember who she was, because I actually don't. And she said, this was about 3 years ago, just before I was diagnosed. Siobhain, why don't you set up a membership? In fact, she didn't even direct it at me. She said it to somebody, and somebody tagged me in it. And at that time, with a full practice, my time limitations were pretty restricted. Now, based on then getting diagnosed with cancer and not having any support other than, if you like, my mother who supported me, because as much as I'd had a thriving practice, the diagnosis I was unprepared for. So ending up having almost 9 months off meant all my savings were gone. Relying on the state and how I was treated was, I'm not even going to go there. It was horrendous, to say the best word I can come up with for that situation and experience. And also, Scope had appeared. Scope had appeared in the therapy world. And
for those who's not familiar about what Scope is,
Scoped is an organisation. It's an idea really to start relabeling therapists as being. It's a crazy idea to relabel therapists that are already qualified with certain competencies and undermining their own abilities. Okay. That's ultimately what it is in a nutshell. Now, myself and David, because of my time off from private practice and us consistently talking, suddenly got wind of the distress that this was causing to therapists. Therapists that were suddenly threatened with a forced accreditation process. And we thought to ourselves, this is a crazy system that's out there. Why can't we change it for the benefit of therapists, but also clients? So that therapists, one, can get accredited in an appropriate way because their self-awareness is taken into account. It's not just based on academics. Lots of people can be academics, but whether or not they can create a relationship is another matter. Actually having people do a self-aware conversation, we call it the conversation of discovery. So direct conversation with a structured framework gives us an idea as to who is self-aware, who isn't. Now that's a bit of a big scale, but myself and David aren't involved in the actual assessments. What we do is our members do the assessments on our behalf, because otherwise it's a conflict of interest. If we do it, we could invite all our friends and just give them accreditation. So we're not doing it that way, we're doing it ethically and appropriately. But it's also based on the appropriate standards of qualification for a therapist. So level 4 qualification in a diploma actually gives the person 4 to 5 years worth of studying behind them already, plus a placement, plus supervision, plus their own therapy. Those things are part of our criteria. So actually our standards are one of the highest in the UK based on all that criteria. But actually when you look at our form is simple, it's easy, it's workable, because it's not completely based on the academic, it's got that added extra conversation that we have.
I think it's worth also mentioning when when you asked about our passion. Our passion is the principles of the therapeutic process, and as Siobhain said earlier, we wanted to make sure that those principles come through. So APA works on the same principles that we use with clients, both myself as a coach and Siobhain as a therapist. And by using those principles in how the business runs and how we then incorporate members into that business is something that was really important to us, because it's very easy to say, well, here is a business model and everyone else has to abide by this model, when the business that we're in doesn't use that business model. So you have a conflict. And I think a lot of what came up with the emotional outcome from things like Scoped, things like the academic-based accreditation, was there is this conflict. another conflict that was prevalent when we were looking at the sector was the idea that therapists are a charity, therefore they should be doing this as charity. When actually, if you look at any other profession, that in order to operate you have to do 4 years as a minimum of study. Would you go to your dentist if they weren't charging you, or they weren't being paid because they were a charity? Because the mindset is, if you have had to study for that length of time, then you should be getting paid for your skill set. You're not being paid for your caring, you're being paid for your skill set, your experience and your time. And that was a conflict within the sector. And
still is a conflict.
Yeah,
money, the therapeutic community and money. It's a huge issue. People see money means that you cannot care. Well, no disrespect. Self-care means that you need to be financially viable. If you think about the stress, for example, living in London, without finances to support yourself, the danger, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, therapists could be in a panic and want to keep hold of their clients so that their bills get paid. Well, no disrespect, that's not the ethos of therapies. The ethos of therapy is we are the one business that encourages our clients to leave at the right time for them in the right way, but in essence we're probably the only business model out there that actually is about people becoming confident and not dependent on us, actually independent of us. So actually you're permanently helping your clients get to a place of autonomy rather than dependency, which is completely different to any other business. But to run a private practice, you have to have two sides of your head, the therapist, but you're an entrepreneur, you're a business individual. Because without that, you can't put finances on your own plate, you can't look after your own family. So it's almost like a contradiction sitting there helping a client work with themselves if you can't do that for yourself. And the way the systems are designed in the UK at the moment are almost therapists are at the bottom of the pile. And the truth of the matter is the skill set that they bring is life-changing and life-saving. So for me personally, the passion is about making sure that all therapists recognise their own value. It's totally contradictory to work with somebody to increase their value if you don't appreciate your value. And therapists have studied hard, 5 years usually, plus the supervision, plus the placement, plus their own therapy. They have to cover all those expenditures. So why aren't we entitled as a practice to appreciate ourselves in the same way that we're supposed to appreciate our clients? It's so ridiculous that we are groomed.
It's one of the, it's one of the things that I think we're most proud of is that we haven't kind of torn down the old systems, and but what we have done is say, you know, there is a different way of doing this, and the model that we use, the linkage to the therapeutic processes are more aligned to the most successful companies and the most successful people in the world. And as a sector, we've almost not had that highlighted. You look at Richard Branson being a prime example. If somebody asks Richard Branson, are you the head or the heart of Virgin? His answer is always going to be, he's the heart of the company. If you ask most CEOs of companies that haven't reached that top 10 marker, they will say, I'm the head of the company. Now, there is a huge difference in the outcome. But when you speak to a therapist about their business, are you the head or are you the heart? They would always say they're the heart of the business. So the model that we use works to those parameters of actually saying, let's bring you to the centre of the business. You're the heart of the business. Let's look at those balances. Let's make sure that everything around you is keeping that balance in place.
And ironically, when you look at what a very good therapist who's self-aware works in the way with their client, it's collaborative, it increases their self-awareness, it's about looking after themselves, it's about teaching them to value themselves, it's about teaching them to work from what we call an inner locus of evaluation, from the inside out. Well, if my organisation, APS Psychotherapy and Counselling, has succeeded based on me not even understanding I was actually following David's NCS model, but I did it within myself. I worked on myself to be able to work with clients on themselves. And if you look at that from a business model, when you work from the inside out, the achievement that you can have on the basic principles of empathy, congruence and unconditional positive regards, UPR as we call it for short in the therapy world, those principles, when they're real, honest and genuine, automatically have a ripple impact on the people you have around you. So I barely advertise my private practice for years. I have a website, I don't do any work on it. I don't need to do any work on it. I'm permanently fully booked because actually I don't even ask my clients for reviews. I never even ask them for reviews. And so many people bank on those reviews to get their clients in. It undermines the lack of conditions. We are approaching clients from a place of unconditional. To ask them for review undermines that. So what my clients do without me even asking is they go off and they recommend me. So 99% of clients that come and sit in front of me, somebody has given them my number that I've seen before. And that's what I mean about the ripple impact of being genuine, real and honest and caring. But caring doesn't mean you can't earn. And the truth of the matter is we've taken your principles that I was totally unaware of until I met David and realised that I was actually running his model.
Yeah, and just this a structure that you're trying to put in place with your accreditation service, is it something that you cannot find on the existing landscape? I'm not quite familiar with the existing landscape of accreditation. So basically what I'm asking is that is this because out of your own experience as a psychotherapist, as a practitioner, that
it's out of my own history of trauma, understanding myself, and if you like, bringing that into my own ability, and combining that with David's experience in relation to business. I'm not a businesswoman. I am now, but I didn't feel, I didn't understand what that actually meant. I just focused on my clients. I focused on loving what I do. It's a vocation for me. And out of that vocation has just had a ripple impact over 18 years of me being permanently fully booked, which is an incredible testimony to not needing other organisations' accreditation that is forced on them. And that's the bit that I disagree with, that principle of force.
When you say force, is that they cannot deliver a practice without
they are seen, there's a
that.
perception that unless you are accredited by a certain organisation out there, you are not qualified. Yet to be a member of their organisation, you have to be qualified. So there's a baseline qualification of level 4, and then there's an accreditation on top of that. And because of the way that things have been created in the employment world around therapists, employers think that unless you are accredited, you are not qualified. The irony of that is that most accreditation policies out there don't include self-awareness. They don't have a conversation with that person that says you are actually self-aware. They're form-filling, and the self-awareness is based on that. And I have facts and proof and evidence, which I'm not going to go into now, that certain accreditations do not mean that that therapist is self-aware. So by us creating something completely different, we can assess people's self-awareness through our conversation, plus the academics. So, and ironically, what we're attracting through APA is the best therapist on the planet. So it's almost testimony to the model that David's created, how we've incorporated that into the therapy world, how it extends in this magical way, because people that are not confident will not phone us. They won't want to apply for the accreditation. Whereas people don't necessarily even understand the word confidence. Confidence applies from within. It's knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at. It's not saying you are amazing as a person. It's saying you are aware of the things you can't do or are uncomfortable with doing, but what do you do with that discomfort? How do you process that discomfort? Because we're learning throughout the whole of our life. We're never going to stop.
Yeah. And one of the things that struck me in the development of APA and the entire accreditation platform was the sheer numbers of people involved. And when you think a level 4 qualification and above, that's the baseline. And that's been set near enough for the last 20 years or so as the baseline. Well, there's over 100,000 qualified professionals in that case that have gone through that process. But the number of people that are affiliated to membership organisations totally across the UK is less than 60,000. Less than, if you take the largest of those, the numbers that are accredited by that largest organisation is less than a third of their members. So for an employer who's looking for a therapist, they are taking the smallest qualified talent pool out of the entire mix available. And while it's not insisted that that's what they do, that's what's being generated.
Yes.
And in order for you to then look at how does that play out in the real world, so it's very easy to play statistics and play numbers, but when was the last time a single practitioner received an email asking for a written response to solve somebody's challenge? Doesn't happen. It happens based on communication. It happens based on the relationship that is built with that professional. That's where the magic happens.
It's also, sorry David, it's also incredibly important to point out that thousands and thousands of therapists qualified themselves to level 4. Then they find out by that attaching themselves to the organisation out there that effectively is BACP, which is the biggest one out there, that actually they're stuck. They can't get a job even though they're qualified, because the perception is by most employers that they've been led to believe you have to be accredited. Now you have to get at least 450 hours under your belt of practice after you're qualified to apply for accreditation. So that creates this huge, great big gap of qualified, can't get a job until I've filled in this criteria. And I can't do that until I've completed 450 hours worth of practice. So then what that means is that that individual who's qualified invariably ends up going off and volunteering to get their hours. So that's somebody that is qualified but not capable of working, because of the way it's been set up and the way that most people have been groomed into believing that they cannot succeed without being accredited. I have never been accredited. It is a fallacy. The fallacy is that you have to be accredited or you're not actually qualified. Yet the irony of that is these are qualified professionals already. So the perception is, can't get a job once you're qualified. You have to do 450 hours. So let's fill that up with volunteering. So we've got qualified individuals that are going to food banks because they can't get a job. And the ironic thing is, they're qualified. And it's so disheartening for me to see that, because we've heard over the last year, in particular with Scopehead, things with IAPT, there's things that have been brought into play in the system where suddenly I've been getting phone calls from therapists that are in tears, where they're being told, unless you are accredited via BACP, so a forced accreditation, you now don't have any more referrals coming to you, even though they've been with that organisation for maybe 10 years and working with clients. And when you are controlled in that kind of way, that affects the whole of your stress levels in your personal life. It also means that it goes against the complete ethos of therapy, because it's a forced control. And that for us sits ridiculously uncomfortable. So we thought, well, if we create a membership where their membership is their accreditation, where it actually extends past the opportunity of just therapists and trainee therapists, that we actually widen it up, because we work with social workers, we work with probation officers, we work with police, we work with other organisations in relation to situations that can happen with clients, to actually incorporate other professions and get them to learn to be self-aware, get access to career professional development that's psychological, which will help their service users out. Then we're actually widening the circle to create a full connectivity with every place out there and every individual that works with somebody that's going through something vulnerable. For us, inclusive is 100% better than actually undermining other people's capacity to even not allow them to be able to obtain employment. It's almost an oxymoron to say you are employed but you are not allowed to get a job unless you're accredited. And that's the perception that's being created, and we at APA want to completely change that, and are changing that, because we don't believe it sits in with the therapeutic model. You know, from the baseline up, accept the person for who they are, accept that they are qualified. At level 4, that's their qualification. To then say, well, actually you have to do this, and then you're qualified, is a complete contradiction of the whole ethos of what we're taught.
Okay, so where we look at the accreditation system, by giving employers the confidence that an APA member has been peer assessed for that comfort level in a conversation. That employer is never going to be in the room with the professional and their member of staff. They have no way of knowing how that conversation is going to go. By having an APA member in there, you know that that conversation has already been tested in a way that you wouldn't be able to do in the workplace. You wouldn't be able to do it in an interview with a professional. You wouldn't be able to sit in and observe a live version of those interactions. We know the importance of good therapy and good coaching is based on the interaction. So including the interaction skill set as part of that process gives confidence not only to members of the public, members of staff who have a company that wants to work with a therapist, but also the employers, but also to the professional, that their peers within APA have all been through that process too. And it's, as Vonnie said, it's the professionals who don't want to go down that road of let's have a conversation. They don't want to get caught out, because they're quite happy to fill in a form, write an essay, and do really well. Thank you very much, here's my money, I'll take the accreditation. But that doesn't match the process of therapy. Clients don't come in and ask for a written essay. So by giving that interaction the place that it deserves.
Yeah, and can I come in?
No.
We don't have thanks. We don't have an issue with accreditation, and I want to put this very publicly out there. We have an issue with the current accreditation system, because there are lots of therapists that are accredited that are absolutely amazing in their work. There are lots of people that are accredited that I'm saying this publicly, I would not put my Labrador in front of them. But that applies to non-accredited too. I don't want it perceived that we're actually against accreditation. What we're against is a system that doesn't take into account that therapy is about the interaction, the relationship. It is not therapy that is ever great. It is the relationship between the therapist and the client that makes therapy work. And the public are not aware of that. They hear all the time, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy. The truth of the matter is, it's up to the therapist, and we can guarantee, and this is something I'm ridiculously proud of, our members, we can guarantee they are self-aware. I'm staking my relationship as a therapist, David's doing the same as a coach. We don't have anybody on there that is not self-aware. We simply cannot afford to have therapists that don't know themselves. And the reason that that's so important is because as an example, if you haven't done enough work on yourself, and you have a history where anger's been directed at you regularly as a child, so it's a very big trigger point. If you have a client that gets angry with you in the room, you are then not capable of separating emotionally from that, because you will react to it. Whereas the best kind of therapist will pick up on that anger, not internalize it, not react to it, but simply want to discuss with that client, what is it that's making you angry? Something is going on, let's explore it, let's understand it, let's work it through. Because there are going to be times when therapists make mistakes, but it's okay to own your mistake. It's understanding the feelings that are going on for that client in that moment. If you haven't done enough work on yourself, you can react to that, become defensive. And if you're defensive in that moment, it can destroy the therapeutic relationship just like that. And that in itself will give that client an example of what therapy is, when that may not be the correct example of what therapy is. Because it's about the individual working with that person. And I'm really passionate about that, because I can see the impact when I can speak to a client directly and say to them, I can see you getting angry. Help me understand what's making you angry, rather than, why are you getting angry at me? You know, those two different responses, the impact of the best one, which is the positive approach, will create an even stronger relationship.
Yeah. So clearly this is a topic that you are passionate about. I could only say that for those who are really interested about the kind of accreditation services that you offer, the best way to do is just follow you, visit your website and follow you on social media. Now, I'd just like to move on to a slightly lighter topic. Of course, for those who are watching from Asia, particularly Malaysia, they might recognize you because you were actually one of the brilliant speakers, two of the brilliant speakers I have for ICPC 2019. Now, if you could just share a bit of your experience out of that event.
I'll go first.
No. He said this is lighter, this is mine.
Yeah, no, but this is go on. Okay, you go first.
Because for me, it was the chance to put the NCS model onto an international stage. And for that, I would say a huge thank you to you.
Thank you.
It was phenomenal to be able to kind of share and learn the experiences from everyone else that was at the conference. But to be able to be in front of the delegates that were there, and phenomenal delegates, and you know, we collectively presented for almost 2 hours. And we spent nearly 2 hours after the event with people wanting to engage with us, take photographs after a conference with a speaker. That's never happened to me in any of the international stuff I've done previously. So it was absolutely phenomenal. And I think by being able to show what APA does was kind of eye-opening for both the education arena in Malaysia and the other countries that were represented. I'm not going to list them. There's like, I think you had like 7 or 8 different countries.
Yeah, 8 different countries.
But everyone that was there had a massive impact on me personally, and I want to kind of thank everyone that was there that took part in that. But yeah, I can't say how much I enjoyed the experience enough. Location, everything else. I mean, if anyone is going to follow us on social media, backtrack through October, November, where you can see the journey that we had in Malaysia. It was absolutely phenomenal. But
can I go now?
No, go on.
Yes. Thank you so much. Dennis, inviting us to that, for me, was so many different levels. And I guess the last one that really tipped me over an amazing edge was having lost my dad when I was 19 to cancer. Which provoked me to get tested at the same age that he got cancer, which is the bit that got me saved, if you like, getting diagnosed at stage 1. Finding out 6 weeks before I flew over that coincidentally he'd served in the army in Borneo, and it was part of, obviously I haven't had him around since I was 19, so to go and walk in my father's footsteps, I can't even begin to tell you what it was like for me. And that was without the conference. The conference on top of that, one, it gave me an opportunity to really share with students that their history was, their trauma that they'd been through was not their fault. And I'd forgotten the power of those words on anybody else. I knew what they meant to me. And for me to have the group of ladies that came up to me afterwards, one after another, after myself and David spoke, will be moments that I will treasure till the day that I die. Having females tell me that nobody had ever said to them that their history of trauma was not their fault, and crying. I was so unprepared for the impact of my words on those individuals. I had the most amazing picture at home, surrounded by, it must be 10, 12 females, all beaming because their appreciation of suddenly understanding their history wasn't their fault was the most profound feeling that I have felt in a long time. That's without Borneo itself. So for me, I recommend anybody to follow Dennis in relation to what you provide in relation to conferences, because the opportunity to meet, understand, work, share, and also, of course, it was Borneo. It was absolutely an amazing country. Me personally, having the very fortunate opportunity one afternoon to be on my own and ending up with an orangutan, a wild orangutan, 14 feet in front of me. If anybody sees that video online, they get my child. I don't think I've ever been so excited in my life and scared at the same time. So to wrap it up for me, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
It was an amazing experience to really share and to educate, but also it's an amazing country. So it was very profound for me on a very personal level. Give me a jungle, give me a beach, give me people that are great. I mean, we were treated with so much kindness, weren't we?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal place, and we will both carry those memories for life. And I think the response that the conference got, not just the reaction that both Vonnie and I got, is again something that is, a credit to the entire event.
Yeah, and of course you could also learn from those experiences to hopefully integrate that with your accreditation service. And for all those who are not familiar, Siobhain and Dave also organize their own events, and we could talk about that later. But I'd just like to quickly go over, because Siobhain and Dave, they do send articles to Psychration. There's one interesting article that you wrote about, you talk about the triad of psychotherapy, if I remember it right. For the benefit of those who are watching us, could you
there's a blast from the past. Okay, so the idea that most support systems come in a box, okay? And if you think about what happens to the human psyche when we're in trauma, like a spin, you get into a tailspin and you're just going round and round. And the support system comes in and it's a box. And invariably you're there because a system has ticked boxes that says you can go into this support system. So if you've got a tornado in a box, at some point it's going to get caught in that corner, and it's not going to be able to achieve the success that it's trying to. It will just keep spinning away in a corner somewhere, and nothing happens. The idea of a triad is if you use exactly and I'm not going to go through the triad here because I want people to go to the site to look at the article, but the principle is, if you have a triad, you have a triangle. You try spinning in a triangle and it's going to force you out of that corner. And it's going to force you to stay in the centre, and that support system is then going to be able to work for you equally on all three sides. So check out the article, check out the details behind it, but in essence, if you think about a support system, it should always be made up of 3 parts: you and 2 others. Check out the article to find out.
And that actually ties in perfectly with what we as qualified therapists do. We have ourselves, we have our client, we have a supervisor. That supervisor is part of our ethical approach. Without my supervisor once upon a time, who went from college right through my life until he died really a couple of years ago, without him by my side, especially early on when I just qualified, his education and a supervisor's ability to educate is not the things you get educated in college or uni in relation to the courses. You get educated in a hugely more expansive way because your supervisor is supposed to be much more experienced than you. They're supposed to be almost 10, 12 years ahead, if not more, than where you are. So having that system, which you're absolutely right, having that system in place where there's 3 people, people don't necessarily understand that that supervisor is absolutely essential to any therapist's progress. Part of our ethical boundaries, and without them, especially good ones, you're going to struggle.
And it's quite telling when you look at the NCS model that we use for the business, we use in our private practice, and in all of the programs that we use. The baseline for all of it is knowledge, and the wider the knowledge, the better the structure, and the more professionals and practitioners and coaches can strengthen and widen that knowledge base, the better their structure, their model, their outcomes are going to be
and
for their clients.
It's useful to point out for APA, holistic insurance is one of the most popular insurers across the whole of the UK for therapists. When they read our guide, we weren't asking them for anything, we just sent it over to them for them to have a look.
We sent to a lot of places to say, look, this is what's coming in the next week or so, take a look, just so you know who we are, and etc.
But Holistic came back to us, and one of their biggest reasons for endorsing us, but not only endorsing us, actually giving all of our members a discount, which makes our members get the cheapest discount across the whole of the UK for indemnity insurance for their private practice. The biggest reason that they did it was because we have emergency supervisors as part of our membership. So all our members get 2 hours free supervision throughout the year. They have the availability to choose their therapist, their supervisor from our supervisory directory. Those supervisors are guaranteed, and I say this because this is my reputation as a therapist and David's as a coach. They are absolutely amazing in their ability, their experience, their understanding, their desire to guide. So to even have supervisors on board and the access to them on an emergency basis, at-risk situations, is really important. Holistic's response to us was the amount of people that call us when they can't get help from their membership bodies, but we're not therapists. So actually you having those emergency supervisors is a brilliant part of what you're doing, because we'd rather have them call you.
And this is still part of the triad of psychotherapy.
Absolutely,
the support,
absolutely.
The clients, and all the resources that
Because individual supervisors can be ill, they can be sick, they can be on holiday, anything can happen.
And the experience or the situation that arises can be out of a particular supervisor's experience then. So, you know, that system of support, that emergency supervision, isn't just there for therapists. Coaches will also get into situations where they're not sure which way to go. Social workers, teachers, every single one of our members has that access to emergency support, and that can only be a benefit to those that are in need of support. And for practitioners who are comfortable and self-aware enough to say, actually, I need to go somewhere, I need to get some extra guidance here.
And even
that's a crucial component of that self-awareness.
And even people underestimate sometimes even the most experienced therapists, and I will speak about myself here. Sometimes just hearing the level of trauma, you can get something that actually really affects you. Now, your role is to take that away from your client and take it to your supervisor. So even having that space to be able just to have an hour with no responsibility to the supervisor, but having that space to offload and just say, this is what I've just heard. And it's really touched me and really made me feel emotional. So obviously we're human beings too, we hear things. So to be there for anybody that works in trauma, and that, I'm really glad you pointed out the social work side of things, because they're actually on the ground dealing with literal, direct, immediate trauma often. Now, unless they have somebody that they can completely just sit back and go, there you go, that's what I've just been through, then they're carrying that. And the problem with carrying that is you don't know where it can affect them in their lives, but also how they interact with the next person. And they've got a very, very significant responsible job because they're on the ground in that moment. We tend to deal with the after effects. They're in it. So to have that, even firefighters, as I'm sitting here, you know, the things that they have to deal with and the things that they see, police officers, where do they go just to go, oh my God, you know, I just want to offload all this. You know, having that availability from somebody that's willing to understand and sit with them through that, I think it's one of the most important aspects of what APA is providing.
And you know, you mentioned firefighters. As most people know, in London anyway, the fire and rescue service has been under extortionate amount of pressure with major incidences, and it's worth pointing out that the fire service in London and across the UK now does have a huge mental health support system in place, and it's one of the things that APA is looking as we move forward to make sure that those organisations that are supporting mental health in the workplace are aware of what APA does and how APA can support those. And that will be the same ultimately where we have members overseas. They will then be promoting that into their own arenas as well.
Because it is important when people are in organisations, they can have the support network within their organisation. But honestly, the amount of clients that I've had come here who, no disrespect to the organisations, because it's not actually about them, but they are frightened of in-house support networks. They're frightened. They're frightened that confidentiality will be broken. They're frightened that if they go in there and they're breaking down over something that they've seen, that will get reported because it's in-house. So actually having something outside of their own environment, and like I said, that applies to my own individual clients through APS. I get teachers, I get doctors, I get firefighters, I've had police officers, and every one of them have said exactly the same thing to me. We don't want to go to HR. You know, and it's not because of the HR process, it's because their fear that it's in-house makes them want to go outside to be able to have the opportunity to speak to somebody completely independent of their organisation.
And again, it's one of the things that we've said, kind of linking with websites and organisations like PsychReg. It gives people that wider knowledge base of what's available and what's around, and different tips and tricks that peers make available through articles and the CPD that, you know, such as we have, where peers are sharing their CPD with other peers, so we can get the knowledge. There's vast amount of knowledge available that will support people.
Yeah, and it's obviously not just restricted to one organisation.
Yeah.
Now, you've both of you are incredibly busy. You've got your accreditation, and you speak at different mental health events, and you write online articles, and you're also authors. We just want to understand what keeps you going.
Adrenaline.
Yeah. For me, corniest word on the planet, but totally true. Love of people, love of the opportunity to help them change. For me, my whole history was extreme trauma. It was a catalogue of stuff that I carried around for years. Understanding how my mind worked, understanding how I related to that, but understanding how the power of that impacted on me. I mean, to even say out loud that having cancer diagnosed at stage 1 saved my literal life. So not just my emotional history and how I reacted to that changed through really great therapy and support. The power of that for people's lives. Life is an essence. You think about a life that actually could be like a little ball, and that little ball can either unravel and play out in disastrous ways for individuals in their personal lives, or that little ball can become solid and strong and you live your life the way it was designed to be, which is we have an amazing opportunity on this earth to enjoy what we've been given. And truth be told, that's where my passion comes from, a history of major trauma, changing it, and knowing that even my self-awareness kept me physically alive without even knowing that that's what was going to happen. For me, that's profound. And I know David feels very much the same. So my passion comes from our last days on earth. I want anybody that I've ever met to go, you know what, I've done my best. I've lived my life in the most amazing way, and I've got no regrets on this planet. Because sadly, too many people get to that day and they're living with regrets in their very last moments on this earth. Now that to me is tragic. So to turn that round and for that person to leave this earth knowing the footprint that they've left for others to follow is content, happy, confident, and caring and loving. That's where I come from.
And one of the first kind of conversations that Siobhain and I had, you know, I think around the time of diagnosis, was something that I was taught very, very early. You know, the old saying, when your life comes to an end, you see your life played out in front of you like a movie. And I was always told, make that movie the best movie you will ever watch, because you will stay around to watch it.
And there's no sequel.
Yeah.
Right? But because you're staying around to watch the movie, that's prolonging your time. If that last movie you watch is so bad that you want to walk out of the cinema, then you're going to go very, very quickly. And that always stuck with me as a kid, and it's something that I think the only way you can make that movie worth watching is enjoy every scene that you are loading into that movie. So the skill sets that we've developed, the experiences that we've had, the things that we both bring to the partnership, to the way we work, the conversations we have, the fact that the team that we have with us, all load up that movie. And I think sharing that passion and that skill set and those experiences are what are driving APA further and further forward.
Perfect. Now, I just want to know, we've obviously learned about your brilliant works, about accreditation, about organising events. Now, are there any future plans? Tell us what you've got.
Oh gosh, the list is huge.
Should we do
but what I'd like to say, just before you get there, this week is literally my anniversary of diagnosis 2 years ago. So in 24 months, I've gone through losing half my colon, getting through the cancer, being in remission, but leading to these projects that David's going to tell you, as well as APA, as well as going to Borneo. I cannot even begin to say in 24 months I could not have believed I would be sitting here with you when that phone call come through 2 years ago this week. I mean, it's just an incredible 24 months. So David, follow up with the projects, because you've got them more assigned in your head than I have. It's more structured than I am.
Okay, so the biggest project that we've unveiled is our Ethical and Psychological Awards, and that is about mental health in the workplace. So traditionally, companies have been told what to do by other organisations in order to improve mental health in the workplace. Well, I hate to say it, but the planet is in a mental health crisis. That process has either failed or seriously not achieved its goal. So what we do know is that there are some great companies out there doing amazing work that are above and beyond the baseline that they are told you should be doing. And what Apple wants to do in everything is celebrate and recognise those organisations. So we're inviting companies, charities, organisations, youth clubs, organisations of all kinds, to let our assessment team know what they're doing to improve mental health.
And how can they nominate themselves if they're interested?
So on the website there is a link to the information pack, and you will see the 2020 Vision Award icon on the website. Click on that, get all the information pack from there. There is a contribution award, which is for individuals within those organisations to be recognised for the work that they're doing. So you don't have to be a big organisation, multinational, in order to be recognised. But what we're doing is saying, share what it is that you do that supports positive mental health. And if the assessment team, which is made up of core torchbearers within APA, social care professionals, HR professionals, business consultants, they will look at what comes in and say, that's great, let's put that up, that gets the award, hands down. Or they're going to say, how about tweaking this, how about tweaking this, and give a support and guidance to those organisations to improve. So either way, companies winning on that front. In June, everyone who is carrying one of those awards will be entered into a membership vote, and on our birthday CPD event in July, there will be one winner of the 2020 Vision Award. Okay. That's the best practice in the workplace.
Okay, so it's a CPD event and an awards day.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else? Book
okay,
launch?
So the
1976.
The 1976ers project, which is a new approach to supporting those that are experiencing abuse in the home. Quick backdrop for those outside of the UK, and for quite a few people in the UK who may not know, 1976 was the year abuse in the home was made illegal, and it has become known as domestic violence, but it started as abuse in the home. There is nothing domestic about violence, and the phrase is something that has always stuck in our throats, and it's something that we know that the vast majority of people that experience abuse in the home are employed. The workspace is sometimes the only safe space that somebody experiencing abuse in the home will have. So the 1976ers project, again, is a triad of support. One side is supporting employers, one side is supporting the professionals that work with people that experience abuse in the home, and the other is supporting those people directly. So 3 tiers of support that we can actually change the outcomes that support businesses. In the UK, it is estimated that abuse in the home costs the economy £1.9 billion a year. No country can be affording that level of expenditure when it doesn't need to.
And more importantly, I do think it's important to point that out because I knew where you were going. Domestic violence is one of the biggest killers in this country. People really need to have the support to understand the depth of it. We see the violence every single day towards men and women, and men struggle with domestic violence in a different way to women. The ones that have been the victims of domestic violence, because they've got that man part of them, they've got this almost added extra layer of shame even opening up about how they're being treated. And we know that women can attack men. It is not just men attacking women. It is incredibly important that we appreciate there's two genders involved here, and both of those go through severe abuse on a regular basis when they are faced with that word that David pointed out, neither of us like, domestic violence. There's nothing domestic in it.
And I also want to take this opportunity, since you mentioned that on my next episode I'll be talking with Andrew Payne, so you will hear a person talking about his lived experience of mental health. But going back to David and Siobhain, so you've got an excellent lineup of events. I understand this will be available on your website, so everyone can just visit your website. Now, we're nearly towards the end, but I just got one question that I will always ask my guests. Do you have any unpopular opinion about psychology or mental health? Now, this question is optional. I don't want to jeopardize your career.
Do we have a
unpopular?
Any unpopular opinion?
For my personal perspective, I think when it comes to APA, we are a new organisation. There is a huge amount of fear of change, whether or not it's therapists, whether or not it's all human beings often have a fear of change. The fear that is out there is unfounded in relation to APA. What we want and what we would love people to do, and I challenge every single person to do this. Download our membership guide, download our application form, come and judge us on those, not me, not David, because truth be told, the response to me as a therapist has been phenomenally bad from some individuals out there. Truthfully, it has. I've been bullied, I've been abused online since APA, but there's the other side of it where I've been supported incredibly well in the therapeutic arena. What I ask everybody is, don't take on board what you feel about me. Go to look how APA wants to help you. Look how APA wants to help the systems, and actually download and make a judgment on us on the back of that. Because if anybody judges us negatively on what we've created for people to help them, then I defy them. I'd love them to come to me personally and say, this bit I don't like, that bit I don't like, you need to do this, you need to do. I defy people to do that. So my challenge is to every professional out there, look at what we're actually doing rather than what you necessarily think of me as an individual. David, have you got an unpopular opinion or thoughts?
I think probably my most unpopular thought around the world of psychology
or
mental health probably comes down to the way diversity across the sector has been played out. And it's been played out in the psychological sector in pretty much the same way it has in every other sector. And I think it's set us up for a fail. It's been set up as, let's identify all of the differences, let's put labels on all of those differences, and then let's pat ourselves on the back when we have everybody with at least one of those labels within our organisation. That's not diversity. That's literally label collecting. And that's something that was done by the Victorians when they went around the world going, well, we're going to have some of those, we're going to have some of those, and we'll have some of those. That was never seen as diversity then, but that's how we're seeing and acting about diversity now. The result of that is we have organisations forming that are then isolating themselves to those labels. And again, that's not diversity, that's more isolation. So you have organisations who feel that they need to form because of the label that they've been given, and then they exclude everyone else because they don't have the same label, which is exactly the same principle for which they felt they needed to form themselves. To me, diversity is about saying one question: are you a human being? And if you are, then I will treat you as a human being, irrelevant of everything else. And anyone who takes a look at diversity and equality, policies, procedures, anything else across this country will see that kind of divide play out. When they take a look at ours, and again, as Vonnie says, take a look at what we actually say and we've put in place, not what you may think or be fearful of. Our diversity policy basically says it's open. We want diversity in a way that you've never experienced diversity before. I love bringing out my own DNA kind of breakdown, because people always form an opinion based on what they see, and my DNA structure doesn't do that. So whatever people's assumptions are when they see somebody, that's what they're judging it on, and I champion people to see beyond what is in front of them, and I always have, I always will.
It's been a fascinating conversation with you, Siobhain and Dave, but unfortunately our time is up. Maybe we could have another episode next time, but
well, I think we will get to a point, because we would like for you to be our guest speaker.
Thank you.
At our birthday CPD event in July.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So
that was easy.
I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share to you what I do about Psych. So for everyone who's watching, I'll see you on 4th of July, Independence Day. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.